So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about accessibility testing and quality assurance. But I'm going to start, thank you for my introduction. I'm going to start a little bit with who I am in addition. Um, so the title that you heard is correct. I just recently got a promotion, so I'm the Chief Operations Officer currently, but I still lead the Accessibility and Universal Design Solutions team at WID. And WID, the World Institute on Disability's mission is to continually advance the rights and opportunities of over 1 billion people with disabilities on a global scale. So that is generally a very large goal, and we have several areas that we work in. We work in disaster response, recovery, and preparedness. We work in global community inclusion, which touches housing, employment, education, etc. And then we work in accessibility and universal design, which is why I'm here today. The other thing I just want to mention about WID is we are very, very committed to disability-led. We were founded by Judy Heumann, Ed Roberts, and Joan Leon, people with disabilities, and we have been continually led by people with disabilities for 40 years. So that is a main part of our mission. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I always like to start with who we are serving. The 15% of people worldwide that live with disabilities and the 27% of all adults in the US who have at least one disability. And I always like to say almost everyone will experience disability at some time in your life. And disability is extremely diverse. Now, the 15% of people worldwide is quite low, and that is only because of the way that disability is counted globally. So I just wanted to give that tidbit there as well. So our topic for today is accessibility testing and quality assurance, and I wanted to start with the basic definitions or the difference. So accessibility testing involves the evaluation of a product and compliance and testing pieces of that, where accessibility quality assurance is the process, the full process of evaluating the design from ideation all the way to putting it at the market and then continually improving your product, right? So that is the big difference. And what we're going to talk about is the quality assurance process. And then we're going to talk about how accessibility testing fits into that process in a variety of ways. Cool. All right, so this is an example of a process. Every company is going to have their own quality assurance processes. This process integrates accessibility. And again, it's an example of what a process should or could look like. And so I have here understanding accessibility guidelines, integrating accessibility at the early stage, that's the ideation stage that I was talking about earlier, using accessibility testing tools. While WID mostly works with UX testing, we really support the use of all accessibility testing tools, automated tools, etc. Testing with assistive technologies to ensure compatibility. People can do this if they are not users of that assistive technology, and I think that's okay if you do that, knowing that you still need to test with native users, and that's where the next step comes in, involving users with disabilities and conducting usability testing with them. When you do these steps 3, 4, and 5, it is important to document and prioritize all of those issues so that they can be fixed, and then implement fixes, retest and validate, and then integrate this quality assurance process with the accessibility, making sure that the process is integrated. And so again, this is an example of how someone might go through that process. You see here I have some maroon and black items. The reason for that is WID and I focus primarily on guidelines, assistive technology use, UX testing with people with disabilities, and working with companies to integrate a process like this into their design structure. And so what we're going to talk about in my time today are the pieces that I do. But this is, again, a great example of how you can have a cycle that has accessibility built in. All right, so understanding accessibility guidelines. This is the basics. So WCAG guidelines are mostly universally accepted as the guidelines that people follow when they're doing digital accessibility. They are also cited in lawsuits and whatnot. So this is really the standard that people need to follow. And it is a very long series of types of guidelines, but the overarching idea of WCAG are these 4 components. And I like to bring it back to that because as technology sort of snowballs and becomes bigger and different and things that we can't even imagine, the WCAG guidelines, the specifics of each piece of those guidelines are going to change and grow. But these 4 tenets were built overarchingly when you approach these guidelines. Is it perceivable? Can this information be perceived by everyone? Is it operable, understandable, and robust? So this is a way to step back and look at WCAG guidelines from the 100,000-foot view and think about how different disability categories and assistive technologies fit into this piece, right? So for example, when doing accessibility, including digital accessibility, lots of people forget plain language, right? Well, plain language is the understandability. Can this information be understood by everyone? So it's not always a very technical issue with the assistive technology user. Sometimes you have to step back and think about the usability, the understandability, and of course, these other core tenets of accessibility. I don't think I need to talk to you all about how the WCAG guidelines are scored, but I will say that right now, well, they utilize A, AA, and AAA, and right now AA is the standard, and AAA is sort of the pie in the sky, and that's evaluated by going through each individual guideline when you're evaluating your product, your digital products. And then I like to show this study. So this is why this work is so important. I always like to say the why. 97.4% of websites were deemed inaccessible by a study that WebAIM did. And these are the top issues that were found: low contrast, missing alt text, empty links, missing labels, empty buttons, and missing document language. I will say that this is disappointing in that these are pretty easy things to fix. I talked about automated testers as part of the process. Well, contrast testers are free and easy to use and available. So to me, having low contrast as the top issue is somewhat inexcusable because it is a really easy problem to solve. So this is why we are all working here, because people don't entirely understand how they can make their products accessible, right? All right, so test with assistive technologies. What are assistive technologies? I have a definition here. as any item or piece of equipment or product or system, whether acquired commercially or off the shelf, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of a person with a disability. What does this mean? These are technologies that interact with digital products, and that this is what you need to test with, right? So when we're talking about vision loss, we're talking about screen readers, magnifiers, glasses, hearing, and then we go into hearing loss, hearing aids, captioning, caption phones, the deaf community, virtual relay communication, the speech disability community, communication boards are augmented and alternative communication devices. So the list goes on and on of what kinds of assistive technologies are out there. And you might say, okay, well, wheelchairs and scooters, that has nothing to do with digital accessibility. I beg to differ. Kiosks are technically under digital accessibility. And if you're a wheelchair user and you need to utilize a kiosk, you need to be able to either roll up to it, or you're going to have to work sideways. And so when you're thinking about your kiosk, any digital product that you're putting out there, you need to think about how people with disabilities will interact with this device with their assistive technologies, right? So what if someone has a head pointer? They're going to have to utilize that screen with their head pointer. Is the height correct? These are physical issues around a digital product. When we're talking about screen readers and magnifiers and dictate overlays, etc., alternative keyboards and mice, those sorts of things are a little bit easier to solve for. And so I want people to think, when they think about assistive technologies, that it's any tool, device, or product someone uses, and that you need to be prepared that your product needs to be compatible with that assistive technology. Now, you can test those products on your own as a non-native user. However, we recommend utilizing the disability community. And this brings me back to being disability-led, right? So nothing about us without us. Involve us in the process. So at WID, we do user research, user experience testing. So if we're evaluating a website that sells something, we will take people through, individual people through a flow where they go find a product, put the product in their chart, complete the checkout process, for example, using their assistive technologies. And during that process, we typically find a variety of things that it's very difficult for for computerized AI to find. So something I like to talk about is buttons. A lot of people have continue, or add to cart, etc. Those buttons are properly labeled. However, are they providing meaningful navigation to the user? Do they have clear directions and instructions for the user? Those are pieces of WCAG guidelines. So when you have a button, you need to make sure that it is directive of what this button will do for you. And so these are the types of things we need people to evaluate, as opposed to a computerized system that can say, yes, there's a label, and yes, this button is properly functioning, but is it meaningful? I also like to use alt text because you can trick computers, and you could put graphic in every alt text box. Will it pass a checker that the alt text is there? It absolutely will. That's a pass and fail. Is that alt text meaningful and useful to the user? Probably not. So Users with disabilities provide real-world insight into how they interact with products. They help identify these barriers and challenges through this testing process. Um, and when using different assistive technologies, it's not a one and done because people are on a spectrum of their abilities with their assistive technologies, and that will determine how their ease of use as they move forward, how they navigate and how they understand the information. I like to say power users tend to move quicker, they skim more and they jump. They miss a lot of content in that. And so when you watch native users navigate through something the way they do on a regular basis, this really is an eye-opening experience on the use of assistive technology and the experience that users have when they interact with your digital product. So UX testing ensures that the products are not only technically compliant and follow the guidelines, but also usable and inclusive in the language, functionality, and understandability. All right. Other ways to involve users with disabilities, maybe you're still at the ideation stage and you're building a piece of equipment, a piece of digital equipment. Focus groups or surveys are really great ways to get other feedback as you go along that ideation process. Focus groups, for example, provide a deeper understanding of the types of experiences people have had with similar products, and how you can avoid those pain points going forward. In addition, it's very collaborative, right? And so involving the disability community and making your product and your design process user-centered will not only improve the product, but it will also create a sense of ownership with the disability community, who understands that you're really working to make sure that your product's accessible for everyone. Typically, when we work with corporate clients, surveys are a great method that we utilize to get ongoing feedback after the product is out and in people's homes and being used on a regular basis, right? So my product's been out on the market for 5 years. Let's do a grand survey. Let's see what people like, they don't like, what their pain points are, what they might have not told us in customer service. And so surveys are another way to involve users with disabilities in the quality assurance process after the product has gone to market. So these are all tools that you can use for accessibility testing and making sure that quality of the product is assured. Continue quickly, looking at time. All right, and so the last piece of that hypothetical process I had was integrating accessibility into the quality assurance process. And so this is my big tagline. Accessibility is everybody's job. So no matter what your role is in any company, if you're in marketing, if you're in HR, or if you're a programmer, there's a piece of your job where accessibility needs to be considered. As you guys heard, I am running WID operations. We have a policy that all WID internal systems need to be accessible. So our onboarding process, our timesheet process, how people engage with the organization, we want to make sure every single thing in that piece is accessible. And so with that in mind, I often talk to ADP about their product accessibility and provide feedback and get assurance from them. They're actually working with DQ, which is a great thing. So I want to tell everybody here that it's a collective responsibility of everyone for creating and maintaining, as well as prioritizing and integrating accessibility considerations into everything that you do. And in each discipline, there'll be a place for accessibility. And as you saw in the process that we have here, we had accessibility integrated throughout the process. That's ideal. And that is not only ideal because people are thinking about accessibility, but if you integrate accessibility earlier, it will be cheaper and easier to do. If you build a product and think about accessibility at the end, there's a lot of work and expense to go back and fix those issues, right? So it's good business practice to integrate accessibility into the quality assurance process and make sure that you continually test and check in with the community about your product and how it's working. And that's my presentation.